It's my favorite part of the show time, money, power, politics. Markets opened up just a couple of minutes ago, and the Dow down just about 45 points. Well, now 30 points, which is pretty much unchanged, as the president meets with world leaders in Argentina, of course, at the G20 summit. He is signing what some call NAFTA 2.0, or the USMCA with Canada and Mexico. For the ongoing trade dispute with China, this thing looms large. President Trump and Xi Jinping are expected to discuss trade ahead of additional tariffs on Chinese goods set to take effect in January. Joining me now to break it down, my dear friend and CNBC contributor, Ron Insana, and my panel back with me. Okay, Ron, yes, when it comes to our trade war with China, what kind of progress can we expect? I mean, President Trump is unpredictable, and many people say that's sort of the magic of it all. But President Obama, just stay with me, was so predictable. It put China in a position that they could play him. They knew what to expect. Is there any argument to be made that this unpredictability of Trump is successful?
Well, I think it might have been if we had allies on our side who felt the same way about it and would go in the same direction as the United States. Going it alone, insulting Asian leaders in public has never really proved to be terribly fruitful, and he is also today in a weakened position. Now, what's being discussed in the press...
Why is he in a weakened position?
Well, if you're the subject of Robert Mueller's probe and individual number one, and you have political problems at home and a Democratic Congress soon to be impaneled or put into power, he may not be the guy you want to negotiate with.
But hold on.
Yeah.
We're all sitting here who are analyzing politics, say he's in a weakened position. But if I'm a manufacturer in this country, if I'm a farmer, I don't see the president in a weakened position. I say the president is there to get one job done and talk about trade.
If you're a farmer or a manufacturer in the United States, you are in a weakened position. There are soybeans piling up in the United States and rotting. There are tariffs that are affecting manufacturers here at home, including places like General Motors, who are closing plants based on the increased costs as a result of these tariffs. Steel producers can't sell into Europe because of tariffs, so other countries are doing it. So they're in a weakened position. He's also, by the way, I think in this instance, only talking about suspending further increases in tariffs in order to get the Chinese back to the table. That's not a deal. That is an ongoing set of discussions in the future.
To that point, I need to read this tweet that the president wrote yesterday, and what a lie it is to the American people and why it distresses me so.
Yeah.
President Trump, billions of dollars are pouring into the coffers of the USA because of the tariffs being charged to China, and there's a long way to go. If companies don't want to pay tariffs, build in the USA. Otherwise, let's just make our country richer than ever before. I am so sorry to every hardworking American who says, let's not challenge the president. He's the president of the United States. That right there is an outright lie.
Yes.
It is the consumer who's paying. Do people not realize this?
If it's not the consumer, it's also businesses who pay, right? So that means reduced output. It means reduced employment. It is a disruption that hurts business, hurts trade. Our exports are down. The dollar's been going up. There's been a whole set of reasons why our exports are not performing as well as they could. And no, the country doesn't just simply collect taxes. It's not a windfall profits tax for the U.S. government to impose tariffs. It doesn't work that way. It actually slows economies and weakens output. So the president has it wrong. There's a very brief period in which we collect some cash, but it's not an economic positive by any stretch of the imagination.
Who believes the president? Because when he says this about tariffs, when people's groceries, for example, the price of them could be going up soon, or GM. When the president goes after GM and blames the company for doing what companies do, Jason, it was President Trump who said to Car Country, we're going to open plants, don't you sell your job. Mary Barra didn't say it. What do you make of these lies that he's telling the American people about business? And how is it, well, let's just leave it there.
Look, I had students, I know people who worked at the Lordstown plant, which has now been shut down right off of 422 in Ohio. A lot of people, not the majority, but a lot of regular people and voters, they blame GM. They blame China. They agree with the president. Even as they are suffering, they believe that in the grand scheme of things, this is the president standing up to China, and this is GM screwing us over again, and we finally have a president who is fighting on our behalf. Now, that may not make sense logically. That may not make sense with any of the available evidence, but I'm telling you, there are people out there who believe that.
Except he's not fighting on their behalf. The president didn't actually put anything in place when he gave, for example, those extraordinary tax cuts that said, we're going to give these tax cuts, but you need to do X, Y, and Z. He's a free markets guy. So the president hasn't, and in fact, in those tax cuts, if you actually look at the language, many manufacturing companies are more incentivized to move operations overseas.
Not only
so
that,
this lie that he's putting forward, how is it that people continue to believe him?
Well, just look at the numbers. The companies have bought back $1 trillion or will buy back $1 trillion worth of stock
That's
this
great
year.
for shareholders and
Great
executives.
for shareholders and executives, and those who have, to an extent, those who have pension and 401k plans, they're doing better. Did not go into wages. It certainly has not gone into capital expenditures, which was part of the incentive program that was written into this tax code. So no, he has not helped the average individual. In fact, one could argue that the average individual is shouldering the tax burden for the corporate tax cuts. Next year, people are going to be surprised at what they owe, given the removal of state and local income tax deductions and a host of other prior benefits that went to individuals and small businesses. Those are going to disappear on your tax return next year, and you're paying for that reduced corporate rate that's now 21%.
Elise, Ron is giving us fact. Jason just gave us the fiction that so many people in America believe. And let's go back to how the fiction works, okay? This new trade deal, USMCA, NAFTA 2.0, the president has called this the largest trade deal ever. That's a straight up lie, but it almost doesn't matter because he says it and people believe him. When you look at what NAFTA 2.0 is, it's NAFTA slightly better. And we needed it to be slightly better because it didn't even include, and no provisions for digital business, so on and so forth. But if the president does a similar thing as it relates to China, slightly tweaking, ripping it up and renaming it, will that be a big win? Will the American people see it as bravo? Because USMCA technically is better than NAFTA.
Donald Trump is a messaging genius. He will keep repeating over and over and over that whatever he's negotiated is a success, much like he has done with North Korea.
Yep.
And have we seen denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula?
We've seen more testing, actually.
Yeah. We saw a very vague statement come out of that summit, but according to Donald Trump, settled, done, win. And so that's what we will likely see with any, deal with China, any trade deal with China. And voters like that because they see China as having taken advantage of the country for so long. So any action, and it doesn't, unless it's explained what the action actually is, which is why this segment's important, because you're talking about the facts underlying these major trade deals that will move markets.
Then that works with American voters. But what does all of this do to the Republican Party, right? You have a president who's going after an individual company, saying, I'm going to take your subsidies away. Where are Republicans? Those same Republicans that 10 years ago were up in arms when President Obama called bankers fat cats, when Elizabeth Warren named specific bankers and their payout. And you had Republicans say, we're a free markets economy. This is capitalism. Get out of town. What do they say to a president who's doing just the opposite, who is the leader of the Republican Party?
Well, listen, they were also upset that GM was bailed out, right, and at the depths of the financial crisis, which was actually necessary to save hundreds of thousands of jobs. At this point, I don't know what a deal with China looks like this weekend. If he says, okay, we're going to suspend future tariff increases, but we're going to leave the current tariffs in place, and we're going to get China to come to Washington to talk about changes to their economy down the road. He still has not dealt with intellectual property theft and forced technology transfer, which are the two key issues between the countries that, again, if we had joined with our allies, if we had joined the Trans-Pacific Partnership, we would have infinitely more leverage with China than we have right now.
Excellent point. And as long as we're fact-checking, as it relates to the GM bailout, President Trump says, and GM hasn't paid it back yet, they have paid it.
Yes.
Everybody
paid back bailout money, by the way.
Pardon?
Everybody paid back
Everyone
bailout money.
paid. You can argue whether or not people should have gotten the bailout money, but everyone who got it paid it back. All right, right now in Washington, prosecutors with the special counsel's office are in federal court to schedule a sentencing date for ex-Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort. He's not expected to be there. We're hoping to hear more details on why Mueller tossed out Manafort's plea deal after accusing him of lying to investigators. I want to bring back my panel from earlier, former federal prosecutor and MSNBC legal analyst Cynthia Aksne and attorney Jeff Jacobowitz. All right, Cynthia, this whole week started with Manafort and his plea deal falling apart. And originally we thought this is devastating for Manafort, or is it? If Manafort was back-channeling the whole way to Trump, and then Trump floats to the New York Post, well, a pardon isn't out of the question, then is today's sentencing that big of a deal?
Sure, it's a big deal, because Manafort has to hope that Trump will follow through and will care more about Manafort than Trump. Well, that's not a very good bet, because Trump only cares about Trump. And right now, if he pardons Manafort, it's going to be an obstruction count.
Except Trump doesn't care if he does things that are highly unusual or unethical.
No.
The only thing that will stop him is the law.
No, I agree, but also he does things that are in his interest. If it was in his interest to pardon Manafort right now, he would do it, but he knows it's not in his interest because he's staring down the barrel of being an unindicted co-conspirator, and he doesn't want that. And if he pardons Manafort right now, that's going to be an obstruction count. It's already might be a witness tampering count, but it'll be an obstruction count. So nothing's going to happen right away, and Manafort's going to go off to federal jail and just have to wait it out and hope. I mean, he has no other options. Nobody else can help him but Trump, and Trump does not really care about Manafort. He only cares about Trump.
Jeff, in business and politics, we've seen President Trump basically turn on anyone when it doesn't suit him. But now his kids could be in question. Michael Cohen's guilty plea has implicated Trump's children, some of them, Don Jr., Ivanka, and Eric. They were all senior executives in the Trump organization, and now, of course, Ivanka is with President Trump in the White House. Do you think they're next under fire here?
Well, certainly Trump Jr. has been within the crosshairs of Mueller because we have the issue of whether he lied on the Hill. And by the way, along the lines of Mueller, one thing I wanted to mention from our previous discussion is Whitaker had knowledge in advance of this plea, and it went forward. And there was an article or a tweet out recently that Rosenstein is still overseeing the probe. And if that's the case, certainly there's no opportunity for Whitaker to harm it in any fashion. But certainly the family was mentioned in the plea. Mueller throws out these little tidbits about who may be being investigated and what's happening because we don't know who or what will see the light of day in terms of his final report.
What's your take on all this?
Well, I think it's, you know, the president is, I think in an extremely rough political and potentially legal position, and I think going forward, as some have suggested, there's a lot more to what Michael Cohen probably told Bob Mueller after 70 hours of conversations with the special counsel. So, look, I mean, the markets may again shrug off these political concerns. They may even accept what appears to be a deal with China, for lack of a better description. But ultimately, I think the markets are going to respond to some of the president's political troubles, and I also think that they're probably going to get deeper before they get better. And I still am of the mind that this president may not serve out his term, that Bob Mueller may have enough that there is both intense legal and intense political jeopardy for the president of the United States.
Well, that will certainly mean that all of us will have a lot more news to cover. Thank you. And you know the kind of news I always close this show with. No matter what, there's always good news somewhere, and we think good news rules. I'm going to say this is one of my favorites ever. When 9-year-old Golden State Warriors fan Riley Morrison, she went online to buy a pair of Curry 5 sneakers. This young lady was disappointed to find out they were only listed under the boys tab on the Under Armour website. So Miss Riley wrote a letter to NBA superstar, one of my favorite players of all time, Stephen Curry. And she told him the girls want to rock the Curry 5s too. So guess what he did? This father of 3, actually of a daughter named Riley himself, he posted his response on Twitter, telling his young fan that he would not only send her a pair of his shoes, but he would work with Under Armour to resolve the issue. And then he invited her to celebrate International Women's Day with him in March. And as of this morning, the Curry 5 sneakers are available on the girls section of the website. Check them out. And to both Riley and Steph Curry, I invite you both to join me on International Women's Day. You know, traditionally, that day, this show is all women, but I am willing to make an exception for Steph Curry. Steph to Steph. All right, that wraps us up this hour. I am Stephanie Ruhle, and I will